everyone, we're ready to get started now. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We have 5 talks tonight. It'll be really exciting to hear. We have a talk on Haskell, Ruby versus Python, soft skills, for navigating the industry, and some students from General Assembly who just graduated are going to talk about the project that they built. So I'm Holly Gibson. I started Women Who Code Austin 2 years and a quarter ago, and now we have over 1,400 members. It's really cool. We do things like tech talks and hackathons, lightning talks, which is tonight, study groups. In fact, we're going to be starting a new study group next month at General Assembly called Ruby Tuesday. It's going to be Ruby's study on Tuesdays, and Catherine O'Neill is going to lead that for us. We're really excited for her to come on board. I have a couple other organizers here. Ophelia helps out with the lightning talks, and then next to her is Sara Inez Calderon. She's also one of the directors, and she does all of our social media. So if you see all the great articles and scholarships and everything that we've been tweeting, that's all her, which makes my life so much easier.
Yes,
So,
also follow us on Twitter if you don't already, www.coding.
we announce a lot of events and
So
other
many
events, not
scholarships.
just Women Who Code events, cool stuff that's going around town. You don't want to miss out. So definitely for the latest news, follow us on Twitter, and also sign up for our Slack channel, and we tweet that. So you can sign up through Twitter.
I have a question.
Yes.
Ruby Tuesdays will be held where?
General Assembly, they are on 600 Congress, 14th floor.
Yes.
Still figuring out parking, so details to come.
Yeah, the same thing, me and parking.
But it'll be 4th Tuesday of the month, starting in January. Alright, so tonight is sponsored by Square Root, and I think Annie is here to talk about them. Annie?
Hi, so Square Root is a local startup. We have about 50 employees in an office that's kind of cool. It's in Clarksville, and we work out of 4 houses, so it's a unique work environment. We are in a space called, kind of store relationship management, where we help large companies manage their stores with like field managers and corporate, helping them all work together. And our stack is mostly Ruby and Rails, and on the front end we work on Angular.
So now you're hiring?
We are actually hiring. We're hiring senior developers and what we call analytics platform engineer. Basically, we do a lot of data science, so we're looking for engineers to help us port data science and our development together.
And you're doing the data science in Ruby?
No, that's in mostly Python.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I work for a data science company, so that's why I was like.
And Sebastian also works with me at Square.
Yeah, we're also hiring dev leads, probably, soonish, I don't know.
He's a dev lead, so you
I'm a
would
dev
know.
I need some.
Cool. Ophelia, you're gonna tell us who's talking?
Yeah. Well, thank you to Square Root. We might have an event with you guys next month, so we'll keep you guys tuned on that.
Ruby workshop.
A Ruby workshop, yeah. But our first speaker is gonna be Kim, and she recently graduated from General Assembly. And
That's all of us.
huh?
That's all of us.
Oh, all of you.
Yes.
They recently graduated from General Assembly, and they're gonna be talking about their experience, and we're gonna be seeing your portfolios.
We have those, but we're gonna focus on the experience right now.
Okay.
Because we want it to be more of a discussion.
Yeah, definitely. Well, come on up. Oh, if you guys wanna write your Twitter handles on there, in case anyone has any follow-up questions afterwards.
I don't have Twitter, but here I am.
Everyone's transitioning into tech. Do this. Okay. We have come from a week of going over our presentations, doing meeting hires over our presentations, so we kind of got to the point where we're like, we're tired of just looking at our website and presenting. So we really want to talk, and we figure like this is a great forum. This is a Women Who Code. This is about our experience. My name is Kim Dilling, I come from a background of working with analytics, web analytics, the odometry platform that got bought out by Google. And so I'm transitioning from a project management role, technical project manager, and I wanted to be more into the dev side. So I decided this was a great time to transition and get those skills based on attending the General Assembly Web Development Immersive Bootcamp, which is where I met these lovely ladies. So we're all in that state of transition, and so that's one of the things we wanted to go through real quick. We wanted to talk about our experience, kind of in a rose, thorn, bud scenario of what the bootcamp experience was like. Several of you here are from the bootcamp experience, or maybe have been previously, and then we're just gonna talk about ourselves for a few minutes, and that's really all. We just kind of want to engage in the conversation of being part of the community now. We're just gonna do introductions first.
So my name is Blair, and I like to make cool stuff like web apps and fiber art. I recently got accepted into the Amazon handmade marketplace.
You should explain what fiber art is.
Oh, it's like wool sculptures, basically. Can you find out more about it here?
It's pretty cool, actually. Check it out.
So I guess my rose is something that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed learning how to approach difficult problems in a new way and working with different personalities, and which can be challenging sometimes, but ultimately
Lovely to work with. Not these personalities.
The thorn, which is a challenge that I faced, it was hard to keep the momentum in learning going after the course. Those 8 hours a day where you're seriously focused on learning, it's hard to transition that out of class, and I'm finding it hard to find the time to continue learning JavaScript and everything else. And then the thing I'm excited about for the future, I've always been like a consumer of technology, but now I feel proud that I can contribute to it in a meaningful way. Hopefully I can join a creative team making cool apps.
My name is Larissa Tater. I come from a background, I've worked in the tech industry for about 6 years now, mostly in consulting roles, so working for software companies, helping adopt teams to the software, helping with their marketing strategy, things like that through software, keeping track of constituents, user bases, things like that. Worked in SQL and then your basic front-end coding before General Assembly, and so General Assembly was really cool in helping flesh out how things work on the back end, which was really, really awesome. And really the reason why I got into it was I've been doing these consulting jobs for a long time, I guess, and working on the business side of things, and really enjoyed being able to help out engineers when they needed, didn't have any time, and it just got my brain really into more of that focus versus
The problem solving.
Yeah, really enjoyed the problem solving instead of versus the business side. So that's why I got into General Assembly, and as far as that experience goes, the Rose totally loved learning stuff every day. It was really awesome. I'm mind blown constantly. I love to learn. I definitely get bored quickly when I'm not constantly moving forward. So that was a ton of fun. And now that I'm stopped, I'm like, oh my God, I'm depressed by noon. It's like, I've got to go do something. But so that was really great. And I will say, the thorn of that is also that you're learning so much, and I don't know if we learned, JavaScript, we learned front-end stuff, we learned Ruby, we learned a bunch of different frameworks. I feel like I've touched a lot of things, but never really got to really dive in super deep, and so I'm not quite sure if that's a great thing or a little bit of a hindrance. I haven't quite figured that out yet. But then my bud for the whole experience definitely was the ability now that I've always had all of these really, what I think are cool ideas, but that I've never been able to go and build. I do a ton of research. I try to get to where I want to go, but on some level, you just don't know what questions you don't know, and so you can't even get to the point where you're Googling the right stuff. And now I feel like I can ask the right questions, Google the right stuff to go build the things that I want, and that has been super cool and fun because I'm still working on a lot of stuff that I've just been thinking about, and just the little wins are a great day. Mm-hmm. So that's me.
Lauren?
I'm Lauren.
Lauren Grant, and I'm a creative person who wants to help other creative people realize their projects and their dreams. And I have a background in contemporary art for the last 15 years or so. I had no coding experience and decided to change careers and wanted to find a place where I could be creative but also be a grown-up who has health insurance and maybe a savings account. And the art world is just not a place to be that person. So I thought I could still be creative in this field, and I found that through General Assembly I could, and I have a analytical problem-solving mind, so it was really fun. And so, like Larissa, my rose of the course was feeling my brain work every day, and like it just hurt really bad. I could feel it working, and that was great. I really loved that a lot. And the thorn of it is that now talking to people and interviewing or starting to barely interview and have coffee with people is that not everyone sees the General Assembly or boot camp experience as a good thing. They don't want to talk to somebody who's in a boot camp because, oh, you only have 3 months of experience. What do you know? So why would I even talk to you or hire you? So that was kind of a bummer. But what I'm hoping, my bud ending here is that once I get in front of somebody and they see that I'm a creative person and that can help them out, that it'll be good, being creative on being creative.
Yeah. And overall, my particular scenario was I came into it additionally to have that learning experience, to grow both professionally and even personally. The challenge I had with the class was the way this particular boot camp was set up was they had this thing where they want you to do 2 hours of homework a night, plus go do meetups, plus, it was kind of a jumble that you really couldn't fulfill anybody's needs. There were the people that ran the professional development that wanted you to go to meetups, but then the people that were running the class wanted you to do homework, and you're like, but I was going to go home and maybe see my family. And so that was a struggle the entire time. And time management is, it's a struggle daily for anybody. But that was one thing in particular where I felt like I maybe could have had a better experience with the coding to be able to attend the evening sessions, because there were evening sessions that helped with homework that sometimes I wasn't able to collaborate with. But in the end, my bud was, this was the right decision for me because this was a great experience. I really got to get my hands into the code. We did a lot of team projects. Specifically, it was built towards a major project every 3 weeks with minor projects every Friday individually. So we did a particular Ruby on Rails project with a group. We did a Node project on a group. We had a Logic project. And then we had a final personal project. So what we all have based on our websites and our Twitter, we have that on there. Mine personally is kimdealing.com, where I talk about the experience and the projects and the platforms that we built. And so we didn't want to come up here and just show you websites. You guys deal with that all day, every day. Your face is in a computer right now, and that's okay. But we wanted to bring in the human experience because that was important to us. And particularly, we did feel that General Assembly was very supportive of Women Who Code. They particularly had luncheons for just us. We had 5 in our group. One lives in El Paso, so she couldn't make it. But where we would have luncheons just for us. They brought in Holly for the first one. They brought in, you came into one as well. They brought in particular women engineers in the space to sit down and just talk to us. And so what we got is the particular FaceTime of just saying, how was your experience? What was it like? How is it different being women? How did you get started in this? And having that one-on-one time was extremely supportive. We do have some funny stories from it though. They were so trying to make it even and balanced that somehow we found ourselves always divided. Every particular group project was one girl per group.
Yeah.
There never happened to be 2 in 1 and 1 in 1 and 0 in 1. It was always like one girl to a group. And after like the 3rd project, we were like, this seems a little forced, but by the time we could, we could have said something all along, but by the time it really clicked with us that we could have just said, can we just have a girl group, or can we just like make it random like it should be? It was almost, we were done.
Yeah.
But so there is this, we want to make this effort out there, but then sometimes they're almost just like trying too hard. And so, but it was a great experience, and so we're now transitioning, and so one of the reasons we wanted to particularly get up and speak to you is we want to engage with you, and we want to actually have our conversations with you. So especially today after the presentations are done, you'll find us coming up to you and introducing ourselves, and we do want to continue that conversation of your experience and how we can relate to that and how we can learn from that. Anything else?
Any questions?
Can you just briefly explain what this General Assembly is? Because maybe I missed that. I didn't I don't really go with. I
Right.
understand it's a boot camp, but just
Right, you want me to answer that, or is it,
Um,
I'll open
yeah,
the floor,
I mean,
I'll share.
It's a 3-month web development immersive class, and so you go in 9 to 5:30 every day. So 12 weeks of intense learning. We started out with
Command line,
yeah, bash,
Git,
yeah, command line stuff. Went into
JavaScript logic.
yeah,
front
JavaScript
end.
logic, HTML, CSS, Ruby, then Node.js, then all of the frameworks involved in
Angular,
yeah,
Ember,
Rails,
We did some
Sinatra,
SQL
SQL.
Postgres, and MongoDB.
Yeah, so again, kind of touching on a lot of different stuff, and then again, even those front end frameworks of Angular, things like that to back everything up. But yeah, so it was just a ton of learning, trying to touch on everything during that time.
And we had like a computer science day or several
Yeah,
days.
some
and we
soft skills. Yeah.
and then you go into the technical interview, you're like, yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah.
Let me.
Yeah.
So you'll see there's several different companies. I think we have somebody here, Iron Yard, there's Maker Square, there's General Assembly, there's Galvanize. I think there's Austin Coding School. They do more of a part-time. So they're definitely growing, and I know General Assembly is in a heavy growth phase right now, so you'll probably hear more. And so we just felt like we had to get our voice out because General Assembly isn't as well known right now.
Yeah,
as
and they
some of
have
the
other
others.
courses besides just the web development immersive. They have UI UX, and they have part-time things. They have Saturday classes. They'll have a 2-hour class on a Tuesday night. So they have a wide variety of stuff. And they're all over. I think they've got 14, 15 places around the world.
I don't know, but it's definitely all over the place.
And who reviewed your projects and who gave you feedback as far as your projects go?
These instructors.
Yeah, mostly.
Well, for our big project days, the larger projects, they did bring in outside people.
Oh,
So they
that's
brought in
interesting.
former students. They brought in Holly for one when we did particularly our Ruby one project. They so a lot of times they geared that towards the technology that we were demonstrating. For the final projects, we had a panel in the morning and then a panel in the afternoon. They didn't want to subject anybody to a whole 8 hours of all of our presentations, which was very good thinking on their part. So we had Trisha, Holly, can you help me with her last name? Right, so we had her, we had several other people in the WeWorks facility that have their own companies come in for that morning panel, and then the afternoon panel was a completely different set, and I presented in the morning, so. But yeah, again, they brought in 3 to 4 people that were in the development space to come review our projects every Friday when we did one of the group projects, and then even a few more for our final projects. Was there another question?
do you still code?
Yes, but that's where we're going through. We're like, okay, we've got to do code wars this morning, or we text each other and be like, what did you do today? And like, okay, let's go take a walk and then we'll do some code. Like there is kind of the forcing yourself to just engage and go do a tutorial or go do something or create something so that we're still doing it while we're in this process of looking for a job. Yes.
So you guys are currently looking for jobs?
Yes.
What are the difficulties you're seeing as you try to enter the workforce?
I think Lauren, I think you touched on a big piece is that there's the whole, do you have enough experience to make it worth our time to really mentor you and train you? I don't think a lot of Austin places are really set up to bring in junior talent. They might have a college program where they bring in a bunch of people in May but from university, but you are seeing a lot of people transitioning in their careers. I know, Blair, you had a lot of technical customer service experience. So we all come from a really diverse background. And so we're really having to sell on we're problem solvers, we're thinkers, and now we have this experience in web development, we want to transition. And so making that known and not just being kind of kicked out from a specific technical question that we may not, be able to rap on about for 5 minutes doesn't mean we can't Google it and learn it, because that's what we've been doing every day for the last 3 months.
And also not really understanding what's going to come within the technical interview. Again, I've worked with software companies forever, and what I experienced in my technical interview was nothing that I ever really expected, because I can talk my way out of probably any problem, and this one I actually had to know how to severely solve it. And I was like, oh, I can tell you about it and touch on all the pieces, but to write working code on a whiteboard was just something I was completely unprepared for. So, just knowing what people are looking for and what they want you to be able to do would be super helpful.
Which we've supplemented from some meetups who have the technical interview meetups and things like that we're working on. Yes.
How long ago did y'all finish?
A few weeks.
November?
November 11th.
I would say 3
Right,
weeks
right
ago.
before Thanksgiving, yeah.
Right
Okay.
before
I'm one of the people in the room that went to Maker Square,
Mhm.
and we were told it would take 3 months to
Okay.
have a job.
They told us the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and everyone in my class had a job, so.
Yeah, we're just getting out.
I feel positive.
All right, good. I'm liking this.
Yeah.
I'm liking this.
Yeah, we're
kind of
getting
down here on the roller coaster. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to get back up.
We're hitting it right at the holidays, so we've already found that there's a lot of companies that are willing to talk and have conversations, and that coffee conversation, and maybe even some general technical conversations. But obviously, the true hiring isn't going to happen until January. So we're not stressed, but we still want to engage in the community that we're now.
I'm totally stressed.
We're supportive of each other.
My first gray hair the other day. It's coming.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Through the course, what do you think would have given you more confidence for job interviewing? Because I think that's the big piece is the confidence, because you only
Absolutely.
have 3 months.
No, I
They
think we
a pretty
did.
good. I feel like they did a good job preparing us and trying to give us some tips on what to expect, especially like the weird personality questions also that we might get, like I don't know, why is a manhole cover round kind of stuff. But it's not the same as actually talking to a stranger in that situation. I don't know, maybe if they had brought some people in to have some real
Like
technical
mock interviews
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
hiring managers.
I think also like having study material for it. I mean, I'm a major studier and I love to be 100% prepared. So when I'm not, I'm like, ugh. So like being able to like have information where it's like, all right, if you had asked this question, here's like an example of something you can say. And if you're asked this question again, like obviously you have to know it, but through having it in front of you all of the time and going through it constantly, you learn it. Versus you went over it for a few minutes one day and then I never saw it again, and then I get asked it and I'm like, oh God, let me remember the drawing that I saw and explain what's happening. It's like I know what's happening, but I can't explain it very well because I haven't been practicing how to talk about it. You know?
Yeah, I think in the end we came up with, we really wanted more of that kind of hands-on conversation, maybe with the strangers, not just the instructors, because we did do that with the instructors, obviously. And so when we talked about bringing people in, they did ask us questions on our presentations that we did have to answer, but more geared towards a true technical interview, maybe during lunches.
Mhm.
That would have probably been particularly helpful. Yes, ma'am?
Have you guys used like Glassdoor for any of that kind of stuff? Or do you-
I have. I mean,
Yeah.
just to understand like what people might ask, but
Cause sometimes, I mean, they'll have like answers, and if you look
Mhm.
at like technical Google or Amazon or, you know, like any of the big tech companies, they're probably gonna be similar questions, like, I'm
Yeah.
probably similar questions, but that might be
yeah,
another useful.
thanks. Yeah.
Definitely.
I found interview cake to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I've been going through that as
Yeah.
well.
Again, I agree, it's gonna be the 3 months of going through all of that.
Yeah.
It's
Studying.
resource overload.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many places to check, the information's out there, it's just curating the
Yeah.
best stuff.
Very true.
Are you getting that though, a lot of tech questions? Because, I mean, I do a lot of interviews, like we have a startup company, and we're really looking at the person a lot more than the technical side. And yeah, we do give them a bit of a grilling, but that's really what they put on their resume. Like, if you're gonna put Node on your resume, we're gonna talk to you about it. Yeah,
Okay.
but it's not because we expect you to know about it, it's just because we wanna know where you sit.
Mhm.
So we'll take you to find your top and bottom, basically.
Okay.
But
Probably because you're good at interviewing, and there's a lot of things.
It's interesting to see how other people are interviewing, so maybe I'm doing it wrong.
No. In one of the meetups about technical interviews, a gentleman, an engineer, came forward and he said, "We're actually really bad at interviews." And so he was like, sometimes we don't realize that we're asking bad questions, or we don't realize that we're not engaging, and it's not a conversation. Most good people will tell you they want to see if you ask questions, they want to see if you engage, and if you bring some conversation pieces to it. Like you mentioned, that's a good interview. You're looking for a culture fit, you're also looking for a knowledge base, and you're looking for somebody that's willing to go look and ask the questions, because that's what a lot of coding is going to look. A lot of times we're not creating something completely from scratch. It's out there. How would it apply to this situation? How can we look at existing technology and bring that into how we would use it? But there's this game mentality that's totally out there that's like, I want to stump you, or I want to see where you get stumped. And so we're kind of, I think it's all out there, and we have to be prepared for all of it.
There's another website called Codility, and it gives you a bunch of example quizzes, technical quizzes, so that you can work through them and then research the problem in the forum once you get stuck. So then you can, they have so many of these, and we actually send them out as engineering quizzes for potential employees.
Right.
But that's a good training tool to help with confidence
Good.
for technical interviews.
Awesome,
Thank you.
thanks. Yes.
On that note, there's a website called Code Wars.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
all do it,
Yeah.
yeah.
When I was interviewing, I found that a lot of problems with software is interview questions.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're getting quicker and solving less questions, it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was told. I had a buddy that brought me in for an interview, didn't get it or anything, but her feedback at the end was like, do Code Wars, go through the fundamentals, and just memorize as much of those problems as you can. Like, that's basically just what comes up nonstop. And I was like, all right, now I know what to do. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's our coffee and kata is what we call it every morning. We just go do at least, 1 or 2 in the morning. Try.
I think one of the problems that I've seen with, we've had some people come in from Ironyard, and I don't think that you guys represent this at all, but what we saw was that, like, we had a few young lads come in, and they really seemed to me to be in love with the concept of being a software engineer, as opposed to wanting to be a software engineer.
That's pretty funny.
And they were dressed like a software engineer would be, but not dressed like what an interview would be. And they had the whole, like, one of them was just asking me really, really crazy questions. Like, he was interviewing me. And it was like, he was just thought that was the culture, that it should be like that. And you're like, no, actually, we're in an interview situation. But I don't think you guys are like that at all, but I think that there is that general perception of people going on them courses where they're just like, okay, I woke up one day and I decided that I'm going to be a programmer. And I think that's partly
Interesting.
what
Okay.
you have to get over a little bit to say, like, 'cause if I saw that in a resume, like, based on the interviews we've had, like, that would be my initial reaction. Do they, is this just a person that just woke up and like, I want to be a geek,
Yeah. Well,
I
that's
think
good
it's
to know, so
maturity.
you can at least.
Yeah.
Well,
Which
you
we
can
had in our
work your way-
class.
Oh,
Did
my
you
God,
have some of
yes.
that going on?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
you're probably gonna see some of them too.
And
You see us,
our
we're
process is
good.
amazing. We had literally a 17-year-old guy to a 70-year-old guy. Like, we had the gamut of ages, of work experience. We had men and women. We had 5 women to 17 guys. So retired airline pilot, a guy that didn't want to be an ER doc anymore, a 17-year-old who was, taking some time before he started UCLA. I mean, again, the spectrum was there. But we did see that, there is a maturity. There's the people, I've been in the workforce for a few years, I get client interaction versus, cool, I gotta function. Like, great. Can you tell that to a client? No.
If you're switching careers, like a lot of people in the class were, as an adult, you know what you want to do. You're not just like, I'll figure something out. I'm a college grad and my mom can help me.
But something to go on your resume, I'd say.
Yeah.
Like, to make it clear that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's really good, because
yeah.
then I can at least figure out a way to talk myself out of that situation.
All right.
We can have more time afterwards.
Sure,
but
cool.
you guys can fill the meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
That was
Oh,
nice.
so much.
Next up is Michelle talking about soft skills. Michelle's also a recent grad.
I'm not just hearing
From the
you,
Iron
but
Yard.
It's being live streamed on YouTube.
So, probably gonna need some help with this. I'm turning it on.
Is it on classroom?
You know what? You have to be on Capital Factory's Wi-Fi. You can't be on guest. Are you on guest?
I am on guest.
Okay. tech talks without technical difficulties. It's like Murphy's Law.
You know, screen sharing in 2015.
Now, we should.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to try to make this short. Couldn't quite get it under 10 minutes the other day, but I'll go quick. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some things that I've been running into, and I'm kind of assuming some people are also running into. I have noticed, I was in a class with 7 other men, 2 women, 7 men, and I noticed that they talked very differently when they got up and they presented. And I did a little bit of research and realized that in this past summer there was a something that kind of went viral about how women talk in the workplace. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I don't want to come off as someone who's policing. Really, I'm just trying to encourage small changes that may maybe boost your own confidence, but also boost people's confidence in you. What you say and how you say it does make a difference. So I'm not here to police you. My name is Michelle Dotsenrod. I'm a graduate of the Iron Yard back-end engineering course. I had a 20-plus career in higher education research administration, which means I handled the money that came in from sponsors for research. And I am a mom of 2. I've been in Austin for about 1.5 years now. So I would be interested in talk to anybody that's interested in maybe attending a code school, especially if you're a mom. I have a unique perspective. It is very different if you are childless going through one of these immersive programs as opposed to people who have children. And I'm looking for a job. So if you have anything for Rails developers or Ruby developers, I'd love to talk to you. And I couldn't figure out how to change this cute little picture, so we have that up there instead of the praying mantis, which is what I was trying to get up there 5 minutes ago. But basically, I wanted to start out by saying, you know, kind of sometimes women are damned if you do, damned if you don't. Research shows that successful women are supposed to have a balance of these 2 traits, one self-confident and dominant, but also having a communal mindset, meaning that they're more team-oriented than individuals. And I noticed that kind of in speaking of those things, we, and I'm saying we because this is how I talk, I noticed that I was doing this, and I noticed that the other women in my class was doing this, and the men were not. And so when I started to research this, there was this giant thing that went viral this summer about the way that women talk in the workplace, and that we tend to preface what we say with these certain phrases that actually undermine our credibility. And I have a few of them up here. I won't go through all of them, but basically what I'm saying is, I noticed myself talking like this, you may notice yourself talking like this, and when you say these things, people actually, the research shows, people are actually focusing on that prefaced phrase than what you're saying. It's fascinating to me because I found myself actually saying this. I just want to say something very important, but they're not actually focusing on that part of what I'm saying. And also the big one here on the top is I'm sorry. The biggest thing here is like, the only thing that you need to apologize for is if you've actually hurt someone or done something for someone. If you have missed what they said or you don't understand what they say, I'm sorry is not the preface you need to put on your phrase, okay? So just stop using that. I'm sorry is kind of a big no-no. And again, I'm not policing. I'm just saying I notice these things, and you may also want to kind of transition into something else. This probably sounds dumb. What are you, 14? That's horrible. I hear the middle schoolers and my daughter hangs around with are like, this probably sounds dumb, but, and I think, no, it doesn't sound dumb. And I can't even focus on what you're saying because I'm so focused on the fact that you think what's coming out of your mouth right now is dumb. Also, but anyway, I've just said a bunch of stuff, but anyway, don't pay any attention to what I just said. just listen to this. Like, what part am I supposed to listen to? Just say what you need to say, and don't be afraid of saying something that sounds stupid to other people. Maybe sounds stupid, maybe it sounds innovative, whatever, but if you preface it by thinking that it's going to be stupid, they will too. And this is for me. And like I said, I don't know if you guys are talking like this, but I am actively trying to preface what I say with these phrases, because I do think sometimes what comes out of my mouth sounds a little bit like I don't have a place at the table, like maybe I don't know as much as everybody else in the room. Can you repeat that? That's the biggest thing. Again, don't apologize for needing clarification on something. I'm sorry, not the thing you should be saying. My thoughts on that are this. You're more likely to listen to what you're saying than that phrase in the beginning. And I have a daughter who's 10, almost 11. And so these are the types of things that I am trying to instill in her and that I want her to emulate. And I was not walking the walk, so that was another thing that I wanted to change how I was talking. Again, there's no need to police yourself, and there's no need to soften your requests. Whatever you are doing, you're coming in and you're asking someone to do, you don't need to say, I just want to do this, or I just need you to tell me blah, blah, blah. Ask for what you want, and you will get it. So what I ask people to do when I talk about this is to, take a seat at the table. Quite literally, when a conference room fills up with men and women, men are more likely to take the table seats than the wall seats. Women are more likely to take the wall seats. Metaphorically and quite physically, that has implications on how people perceive you. And I think that when you're at the table physically and mentally, you can give more to the team. So if you are someone who thinks communally and as a team member, you're doing more for your team if you're taking a place at the table. Welcome yourself on stage. Practice saying no. A lot of women get, they are asked to do tasks that are maybe outside of their scope because they are communal thinkers. Maybe you want to organize the company party, or maybe you want to, organize this or whatever as a team member. Those are great, and if you want to do that, but don't feel pressured into kind of hurting the team together. You can say no to those things. And don't even think about fetching coffee, right? I mean, if you're near the door or you're against the wall, it's you that's going to be asked to go fetch something, whether that be an extra projector or another cord or coffee. I'm from the Northeast, so that might sound funny when I say it, but don't do that. Take a place at the table. They're not going to ask you to fetch coffee, okay? Again, so my name is Michelle. I hope that this was somewhat helpful to you. Again, this was really for me to remind myself that these are things that are small changes that I can make that can increase my confidence in myself, but also others' confidence in me. You can reach me at Twitter and GitHub at mmdots, or you can email me. And again, I'm from the Iron Yard. I just finished there. If you'd like to talk to me about my experience there, I'd love to talk to you about it as well. Any questions?
What would you do if someone asked you to fetch coffee?
Wow, that's a great question. That's a really great question. I've never been asked to do that. And so here is my experiences. I worked for Brown University for many, many, many years, and I had a siloed part of the business process, and I was an individual, and I didn't really work with teams very much, and I was the owner of that, and so there was no team really with what I did, so I don't have a lot of experience working on teams. So I because I do have a communal sense, I tried to join as many committees as I could, and get appointed to task force and those kinds of things. And my experience was that I wasn't treated differently in those situations, but I think it was because I already had this kind of I had confidence around what I was doing, and when I entered this realm, this is totally new for me. I don't have the confidence, and I can picture myself sitting against the wall and kind of just being like, okay, I'm just gonna sit here and listen and whatever. So, like, truthfully, I think if I was sitting against the wall somewhere and somebody asked me to fetch coffee, I'd be like, okay, sure, yeah, you need me to do that? Sure. You know? But no, but don't do that, you know? Like, I don't know what the answer is there, but if you feel that that is going to help you integrate with the team, do it once. I don't know, don't ever sit there again. I don't really know what the answer is. I wish I did, but I'm in the same boat. I'm kind of like, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
You know? And some people are totally fine with that. They want to be helpful. I'm a super helpful person. I want to please everybody. But I think if I was asked twice to do that, I'd be like, no, not fetching your coffee.
But you're probably right. Sitting by the door would probably make you more.
Yeah, there's a
likely
physical
to
manifestation of the helper, right? Like, whoever is like, they're going to be up here flipping the switch. They're going to be like, you know, the back of the room people are always kind of like, I need help. Someone in the back of the room. You know, you never really ask anybody up front. So it's definitely something that you can play around with too. Like, I don't know, sit in a different place. Like, I'm not really sure, but those things do matter, and you do have to kind of feel them out, I think.
But don't you, I think you have to hold your position. I mean, I used to work in a 16-man team, all female man team at Thomson Reuters, and it was a bloody big floor. And sometimes people used to come up to me because I was the only woman and say, you know, can you help me find so-and-so? Or can you, you know, how's this fax work? And I purposely never learned how to use, I still don't know how to use a photocopier. I don't actually know how to use one. And, or a fax. And I would just look at them and just go, no, I have no clue. Like, and they'd say, do you know so-and-so? Or I'd say no, and carried on my work. You know, and the coffee thing, I always drink water. I never ever got anyone coffee.
Yeah, I'm not a coffee drinker either, so I could easily be like, oh, you don't want me to make that coffee.
But I actually did that on purpose because I worked in small teams and people would go around and drink coffee. I go, no, I drink water. And that's it, I'm out of the equation because I'm fine, I don't get my own water.
Well, like I say, these were not things that I ever thought about when I was in my previous life doing a different career, because I knew what I was doing, I was excellent at it, and I didn't suffer from any kind of confidence issues. I mean, I kind of don't now, but I mean, but now I'm in this field where, like, the imposter syndrome that we talked about kind of creeps in a little bit, and I no business being here, and yeah, I'll just get the coffee to be helpful, but it, you know, in the long run, it doesn't do you any good. Sarah.
Oh, just real quick to that, I actually worked at a place where my thought was, I'm gonna make coffee in the morning because I'm the first one to get here because I'm fucking awesome. You know, because I want everyone to know I was like a mid-level manager, like, that I want us all to like start the day off, and then one day I did it, the co-founder, who was not the most feminist guy, let's say, so I started no coffee today, and after that I was like, I'm never making coffee again, 1. 2, when people ask me to do things like, oh sure, yeah, there's some coffee over there in the cabinet, feel free to help yourself. That's what really, because then you seem so helpful and nice. Yeah. But you're like, I'm not gonna get your coffee full.
Again, then you're the bitch.
We have time for more questions, but you will definitely be around after.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay, Annie from Square Root is going to be talking about API developer tools. Is he joining you or is it just you?
Huh?
Okay, perfect.
What is the Capital Factory question?
It's the factory. Yeah.
I think you're connected. Over airplane.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
A different As a sidebar, you're gonna look at this guy. Not easy.
This is it. Yeah, he isn't just
Everything? No, it's not everything.
Did it work?
No.
Are you on Capital Factory?
No, I'm trying to get on it. Is that not?
What is that's the guest password? Only I know the real password. Oh, okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Annie again. And today I want to talk to you about awesome tools for API developers. Now, this is a name tag I have on my desk at Square Root. Whenever a developer joins Square Root, we ask them to come up with a fun title other than software engineer. And so I decided to give myself the fun title of API Wrangler because I love working in the back end with APIs. And it just so happens that the project I'm working on at work is internal API. We're creating a new API from scratch. And so throughout this process of a couple months, I've used a lot of API tools and wanted to go over some really awesome ones I found. So for those who don't know, an API is basically an interface for you to talk to a server and get information from it. There's the request, which is you have an action like get, and then you have an API endpoint that you talk to. So in this example, you'd have something like a blog and you want to get the post from it. And so you do get post, and then as a response, it would give you 200 OK, meaning you have valid requests and here's the information. And most APIs nowadays follow a standard format called JSON API, and that's kind of the format of the response. And so here you have, they tell you there's posts that they're returning, the ID and some attributes like the title of the post. So the most basic tool we can use to quickly send a request and get a response from an API is curl. It's a command line utility, and it's pretty awesome. You just you open a terminal window, you type in curl and then the URL of the endpoint, and you receive a response back. Now, the difficulty comes when you have all these options. Like most APIs are secure, so they have an authorization header that you have to send in. They have different kind of requirements. And so with curl, you have almost 200 options. And you learn to memorize some of the most basic ones, but still it gets very complex very quickly. And so, after typing, 20-line curl statements, you're like, there has to be a better way to get data back, and there is. So I use Google Chrome as my main browser, and there's an awesome extension called Postman. And so it's this graphical interface, and so you tell it the action you want and the URL endpoint. And instead of having to remember option flags and everything like that, it has like the most basic common options for sending a API request. And what I really like about Postman is that it saves all your history for you, because when you're, testing out an API endpoint for the first time or something, you kind of want to repeat the request over and over again. So rather than, having to type out the same URL 100 times, you can just go back in history and click on the request, and it'll send it again with all the kind of options and everything saved for you. There's also collections, so if you work with multiple APIs, you can have a collection for one API and then another collection for a different one, and it kind of groups your history together. So Postman is a really awesome tool. It saves me a bunch of time. But what I really want to talk about in this talk is an app called Paw. And this is the main window for Paw. It looks kind of complex. There's lots of things going on, but it's saving me a ton of time, and it's very useful. So I'm going to step through the window. So they have a menu where you can
you can, I guess, make requests and you can save them and give them names and it will remember them for you. And you can add multiple requests and actually select the ones you want and it can actually run them sequentially. A cool feature of PAW that's kind of hard to get to in Postman is that you can work with multiple environments. So, you know, you may be working with an API locally and then have to test on a dev server, and then maybe once in a while you'll have to test in production. And so you can actually click on the gear and you can manage your environments, and you have environment variables. So, you know, for your local environment, it will be localhost, and then for a remote server, it will be like the server name that you can add as an environment variable. It also has an easy way to create authorization headers, and it will save, you know, username and password out of sight. So if someone was to just, you know, walk by or try to look at your request information, they wouldn't be able to determine your username and password. So in the main window, there's, you know, your action and then your URL. And another cool feature of PAW is that you can use data that you retrieved in a response of a separate request in a new request. So I initially did one request with get hierarchies, and with PAW you can specify, you know, I want you to get this request, parse the body, parse the data that was returned, and you can specify, I want you to include this past data in maybe the URL or a header or a parameter of the URL. And so that's really cool because you don't have to keep going back and forth and like looking up information and pasting it in. And if you know, do the first request again and the value of the response changes, you don't have to go back through and copy and paste again. And so when you finally send the request, after you set it all up, you can actually see on the right side of the window the exact request information you sent, and then also the response in different formats. You can see the raw response like you would get when you issue a curl command, or you can see it parses out nicely in JSON format for you. And so with PAW, they actually have a .paw file extension. You can save the entire configuration with your multiple requests and environment variables all in a file. And my team uses this functionality a lot because we'll have someone QA our code, and to show them that works, we kind of do the setup for them, and then we pass off the file, and they can look at it and they can try out the API and the code for themselves. And it also helps with troubleshooting APIs. You know, show someone, you can be like, these are the requests I made, this is the output, you know, do you see something I'm not seeing? And so it's really great for that. The one downside to PAW though is that it's a Mac only app. So if you have other developers that, you know, are using Linux or Windows, and they can't use this app, so the PAW developers know that this is a shortcoming, so they have an export functionality. You can choose curl, and it will spit out, you know, the snippet that someone can just copy and paste into a terminal, and it will run the exact same request. There's also an export feature of Postman, so if another developer is using, you know, like Chrome on Windows, they can import this Postman export from PAW, and then they can run the same request in Postman. And so that's kind of a quick overview of PAW. I really like it. It's only $30 for a license, which based on the number of hours it saved me, it's very cheap. So thanks. Anyone have questions?
So do you use all these tools every day at the Square Root?
Yeah, I use PAW every single day.
Is there anything about PAW that you don't like?
Yeah, there's a lot of menus that you have to kind of go in and out of, but after a while you kind of develop a workflow and you know exactly where things are and where you should go to change things.
How long have you been working there?
I've been working at Square Root for, I guess, 5 months now. Yeah.
Did it seem like it took a few months to like get into the code and acclimate it, or were you able to like just dive in day one?
Oh yeah, it took a long time because Square Root, the company's actually been around for about 9 years, and so there's old code in there from like Rails 1.0, and we have a lot of offshore developers who may not have followed best practices in their code, so we have a huge code base. It's spanning like, yeah, it's a pretty large code base, so it took me a while to delve in. We have, you know, Rails engines and gems that we made ourselves, so it took a while to go through and figure out, you know, what parts are working with what parts. And yeah.
Did they have anybody who could mentor you, or you just had to do lots of Googling and reading the code, or I mean, what's your method for like learning a new code base?
Usually I try to go through a code base and look at unit tests, and those kind of break apart pieces of code into smaller pieces so that you can kind of see the workflow of the code. But in this case, there weren't that many tests. It was old code, but they had documentation that kind of helped you set it up on your local machine and kind of step by step directed you to kind of the workflow of the main app. And then when all else failed, you just have to get your hands dirty and go in and try the code, you know, like go through and work it through the app and kind of look at where the functionality is in the app and work through it.
Cool. Awesome. Any more questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there other female engineers working at Square Root that you could kind of latch onto, or I mean, I don't know. Because in our engineering department, we only have one female, and we have one female working amongst 22 other male engineers, and she seems kind of like an outcast because she's.
That might be just your perception.
Well, yeah. But I'm yeah.
Yeah.
And do you feel any of that, like?
So at Square Root, we have 16 people in our engineering department, and one other woman who is, I guess she's a front-end developer, so I don't work with her as much because I'm mainly focused on the back end. But in my team, I actually had the pleasure of working with a female data scientist, which made things pretty awesome. I've never actually worked with another female kind of developer engineer, so that was nice.
We also have some offshore engineers, or a fair amount of, at least one or maybe two on something.
Yeah.
But the ratio is still low, or lower.
Have you used Advanced REST Client from Chrome? Have you looked at that?
Yeah, I've looked at it a bit, but I've just gotten used to Paw, and it's what everyone else on my team also uses.
Yeah. It's a lot simpler interface if you're just starting out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Postman is good for too, because it's simpler interface.
Thank you.
Next we have Savani. Hopefully, did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, Troy child.
I know,
And she's going to be speaking about Haskell.
I'm also the only person here who can't use AirPlay, so we need a moment for me to switch things around. What's that? Oh, yeah, there's always that hope. Output? I see the output.
You said there's only one button that I have to push. I went over that one button.
Okay. No, it should be.
We're live.
That's it.
Stop.
There we go. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Savani. Tonight I'm talking about Haskell. This is kind of an odd format for me because I'm used to either doing like a 5-minute, okay, yeah, this is the Haskell elevator speech, or I'm used to doing the 2-hour, I'm teaching one particular part of the fundamentals of Haskell in an ongoing class. All of these slides are already posted on my website, that's funny2jrnl.com. I'm currently an engineer at Energy Curb, where they're actually paying me to be able to use this rather esoteric language that I have spent so much of the last few years of my life learning. I'm also a code witch, a photographer, a cyclist, I'm agender, I'm a feminist, I'm a radical queer, and I'm just kind of a general geek. By the way, I just listed all of the topics that I will talk your ear off on any given day. One of the things that I do is through the Feminist Hack ATX group, I actually teach a Haskell class. It's currently on hiatus, but I'm going to be resuming it in January, and I'm actually going to start up I'm calling it a second section in much the same way that college professors would do it, in order to start a new group of people at the basics and possibly, hopefully, creating better coursework than I've been creating. I created it specifically to be a safe space for women and non-binary people, because if you go to the Austin Haskell Meetup, it's a whole bunch of dudes.
Not anymore.
Not anymore?
I go there.
Awesome. And with that, we actually followed the code of conduct that came from the Geek Feminism blog. There were some problems because the group was too small, and if there's any kind of complaint about me, there's nobody to complain to because we don't have enough people. Okay, about Haskell. First of all, why do I choose Haskell? Before I go into the features of the language, why do I choose it? And it's because it happens to have a particular set of features that I feel protect me from the kinds of mistakes I make all the time. I've been programming for 25 years or more, it's hard to say which. I've touched Python, C, languages I've forgotten. I had JavaScript pushing me under the desk to cry frequently over summer.
That makes us feel so much better.
Oh, it was so hard.
It's not just you, baby.
So we'll now go into some of those features. The first of the features that I really love is Haskell is statically typed in much the same way that C or Java or Scala or any other number of languages where all of the type checking is done at compile time. By the time the program is running, you know all of your data types are right. But, yeah, oh my. But Haskell also has an incredible level of polymorphism that I'll illustrate in a moment, and it has a type inference engine that can generally guess your data types even if you don't tell it what data types you're wanting to use. And it'll explode and tell you when you're wrong. And we also have an interface system that we call type classes, which I think some of the mathematical purists would come along and tell me, no, they're not at all alike. And I say, it's an interface, just like in Java. So here's an example of functional programming. The map operation. It's a very basic operation. You might be familiar, if you've done, I know some of you have talked about Mongo. Is that big enough? Okay. Some of you have talked about Mongo, so you'd be familiar with MapReduce. This would be the map side of MapReduce. The first line there is a typical Haskell type signature, only this time it doesn't have any of the data types specified. It just says, well, any type A and any type B. The first parameter is a function that converts from type A to type B, which could be the same, might not be. The second parameter is a list of type A, and it returns a list of type B. Pretty simple there. This is a basic implementation for map. This is not how it's implemented for real. This one has all kinds of problems, including performance issues, and if you recurse too far, it will actually explode your stack, because I didn't put in tail call recursion in there. But that's an example of how it works. I will actually never implement that function because it's been hyper-optimized inside the internal library. So we'll reduce it down. And I'm going to introduce to you a hypothetical function called GP rating. It takes a survey. I haven't told you what a survey is yet, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And it maybe returns an integer. Well, if I apply GP rating to the map operation, then I get a brand new function, because Haskell allows you to partially apply functions. So we have this brand new function called map rating that takes one parameter and will return a result. And the type inference engine is actually able to automatically figure out what that parameter has to be. It has to be a list of surveys, and it's going to return a list of maybe there's integers involved. We have additional basic functions that are common in functional programming, such as filter, that's not in the MapReduce. I'm not so familiar with Mongo, so I don't know what the equivalent there is. But it's basically just taking your list and filtering it down based on some criteria. We have an equivalent of a reduce operation. All Haskell functions have a tendency to look like mathematical operations, just like these. Sometimes they get longer. Typically, though, they're only like 2 or 3 lines, unless you're doing something interactive, where all of the rules change. One of the other things that I really like about Haskell, it protects me, is that you don't have any state changes at all, except in code that's specifically annotated for it. As an example here, I just create a basic empty data structure that's a map. In Python, it would be a dictionary, I think. I don't know what it would be in Ruby, unfortunately, but I mean, it's a very basic data structure, basically an associative list. And of course, it's empty at the beginning. So the first thing I'll do is I'll insert Savani as the key with some data. Okay, cool, there's a new result. I'll save that off in a variable, and then I'll feed that variable in and just replace Savani with another description. I'm a code witch. Okay, cool, save that off. But then I go back and inspect the data, and unlike in Python, the initial list is still an empty list. This new label that I created right here, M2, has this value, and then M3 has its own value. The data never gets destroyed. There are ways to do destructive updates. Sometimes you have to do that for optimization. But for the most part, the people who created Haskell are really, really good at making sure you don't use too much memory in most of your common use cases. It would seem like you would be duplicating the data structure every time you make what looks like an update, but you don't. There's some structural sharing. I don't understand how that works. I once tried to watch a video from an MIT professor who was explaining it. It's like, I'm out. Can't do this. Okay, algebraic data structures. This is where this is one of the places where Haskell becomes really powerful. It's really easy for us to define data structures that kind of look like objects and kind of look like enumerations and take different forms. So this first one right here, which I called birth assignment, as I said, gender is one of the things I talk about, male, female, and intersex. Those 3 terms right there we would call value constructors. I can put that term into like anywhere that a value would be, and it creates a value. That data structure, birth assignment, is basically the same as an enum in standard C. There isn't really an equivalent in Python. I searched for many years, but couldn't do that. Trust me, I tried. The second data structure, though, shows a different format, which gives us something more like a record. It only has a single value constructor, which is named survey, and then there's 3 parameters that have to go along with it. So, like a string, maybe there's a birth assignment, maybe there's an integer, but there's no description as to what these mean. So there's an alternate syntax that we have where you can, in declaring the data structure, actually say what these things mean. And there's nothing really particularly magical except that these 3 labels right here, the compiler automatically knows to just create, okay, this is a function that goes from a survey to a string, and a function that goes from a survey to maybe a birth assignment. And then I'm going to skip that. That becomes more important later. Okay, now you've seen the word maybe in there a whole lot. One of the other great things, we don't have null pointers. We have explicitly built in as a standard data structure in the library a way to express that, hey, this function may not be returning a value, or maybe I don't want to feed a value into this function. The data structure is really almost identical. It's actually emerging of the 2 concepts that I just showed you. This one has this maybe has 2 constructors, one of them being nothing, indicating there's no value here, and the other one being just and requiring a parameter. That parameter also expresses how, like, the maybe here isn't actually a data type on its own. It's actually sort of a metadata type. You have to, in order to really be in order to actually use this thing, you have to actually give it a particular data type. Hence, previously you would see maybe int. It would mean maybe you have an integer value. Standard lookup operation for the data dictionaries. But I just explained what all of that means. You're expressing that, well, if there's not a value in the dictionary, then I'm just going to return a nothing instead. For handling errors, we have a different data structure, much the same idea. We call it either. I think because a few decades ago when they invented it, it was supposed to be either the left branch or the right branch of a binary tree. But we don't do it that way anymore. We actually just use it as this is the standard error data structure, or this is the standard data structure for representing a function that can fail with an error message. See, I can see you piecing it together.
Putting it together, you're getting it, you're killing it. I don't know what you're talking about, but you're killing it.
You don't know what I'm talking? That's not a good thing. That means I've completely messed up my lecture.
Slowly, it's getting better.
In all of the pure code, we actually use either to represent whether or not a function actually succeeded. By convention, the right value, indicating sort of correct as a mnemonic, is whatever you're expecting to get back. The left value is whatever error message you need to return. An example of that is a standard function, or not really a standard function, but it's a fairly common function that I will actually use later on. Decode either, which happens to take a JSON data structure, or actually it takes a byte string, decodes it as though it's JSON data, and maybe it returns an error string, or maybe it returns, well, this survey that I keep talking about. Am I still good on time? Okay, cool. I mentioned interface polymorphism. This is how we declare interfaces. I haven't really shown any of this yet. One of the most common interfaces that we have is called show. It's a way to just take any arbitrary data structure and turn it into a string. Yes, exactly. We have. I'm not going to bother with functor tonight. Too complicated to explain at the moment. But we also have an equality data structure. These data structures that I've defined before, you can't print them out. You can't even compare them right now because I haven't told the compiler how to do that. So as an example, please ignore this second half. I'm just skipping it tonight. But as an example, here's how you would implement the show type class for a particular data structure. Now, on the other hand, that's really a whole lot of tedium, and with a lot of the basic type classes, the compiler is actually able to just kind of auto-derive them. It just takes a little bit of extra syntax. There's something like 7 or 8 of the most common type classes the compiler can just do, and that includes showing things, ordering things, basic equality comparisons. It can do that with more complex data structures, just so long as, like in the case of the survey, these additional things that I've defined here are themselves already showable. So if I had left out this show declaration here on the birth assignment, then it would have gotten right here and said, I can't do this. No, you're going to have to go back and figure out how to serialize that birth assignment for me. Okay, now why was all of this important? By the way, this is test code, so now I'm actually going to talk about some of the code that I'm going to demonstrate in a few minutes. This is actually hypothetical code for I'm noodling around with how to analyze a survey that we gave out in the trans and genderqueer social group a few months ago. Not a few months ago, it was only a month ago. I'm not that far behind. So I'm noodling around how to work with it. That survey is like really tiny section of what was it, or the survey that I'm describing here is a really tiny section of what we actually had people fill out. And so on this page, this is like basic testing for how the data structure would work. I do unit testing. I'm sure Trish would appreciate that. I happen to do it specification based because I just like the format and I like how it flows through. I can, of course, like in most other languages, I can declare all of the tests. I can mark them as pending. If I were to run this particular file, it would like print out all of that information and say, this is pending, and it would color code it yellow, and it's really great that way. But I actually have, for tonight, filled the entire thing out, and so this is what some actual running Haskell code looks like. We'll skip over this because I'm going to actually walk you through a little bit on the command line. The code that we're testing looks like this. This is actually a full-on Haskell module. I'm going to actually load this code in a few minutes. We have imports, just like in most other languages. I declare my data structures. I have two interfaces for converting from like a generic JSON intermediate format into the actual data that I want to work with. And then I have like a function for just making it really easy to load things, and then a function for running an average across a bunch of integers, because for whatever reason I wasn't able to find that function last night. So, okay, here we go. So let's go live for a moment, and that is so not visible. There we go.
You got a little bit higher.
A little bit bigger?
More. Yes. Thanks.
Okay. Can everybody read that?
Not the code.
Not the code part. The right side is really good.
There we go. Code part. Although the code part is mostly because I need those notes for, these are some of the commands I'm going to type in on the command line. So the first thing that I wanted to show you is there we go. I just want to demonstrate, hey, unit tests, great things. They all turn green because I actually wrote the code. I actually got the code correct. Although a lot of people might like joke about how once you get Haskell code compiling, it's always right. I can say for sure that's actually not true. While I was writing this code, I made a mistake that caused one of these tests to fail because I misnamed one of the fields. And so it wasn't actually loading from the survey document that I created. Did I type that right? Yes, I did. Haskell has a REPL. Greatest thing in the world, although I discovered that way back when Python was a new thing. So start out. I'm going to start out just by loading the actual survey document that I have here. And there's a whole bunch of stuff there that's kind of unreadable. I'm going to, since I know that everything loaded correctly though, I'm going to pull a couple of tricks here. That makes it a tiny bit easier. There we go. This is kind of easier. I took a basic print operation. This is actual IO world. So purity actually is no longer around. But I applied the print operation to every single value in this surveys list, and here's all of the data. I should note all of this data is faked. Just so you know, I am not revealing anything.
Nuts.
Well, technically, one of these isn't faked, except like this last one is from my own copy of or like what I filled out. Except I don't think I rated my physician that highly. Okay, so I'm going to start querying some things. So I actually need one extra library here. So we have, the first query I want to run is the group by operation. And right here, what I just did was I asked the compiler, well, what's the type signature for this thing? I actually find that that's one of the most helpful features of the entire language, because I can actually build up expressions in the REPL, ask the type signatures, make sure that the type signatures are right, and then eventually just paste those directly into my file. Group by is an operation where you give it a list, you give it the conditions for comparing various things in the list, and it's going to start grouping them based on whatever that list is. So the first grouping I'm going to do involves creating an anonymous function . And of course that's unreadable. That's okay. Group by. So The anonymous function down here, this /xy, this is identical to lambda syntax in Python. I don't know what Ruby equivalent is, but I know it's there, and with JavaScript it would be like just putting the function declaration right in the middle of a line of code. All it is it's taking two parameters, extracting one particular field out of both parameters, comparing the fields, and then grouping things based on those results. And I'm going to save that off. And of course, I can go through and just kind of iterate down each one. That gets really boring really quickly. But let's say I want to actually ask a slightly more interesting question. I'm going to go ahead and save the result of this to a variable. But let's say that I'm interested in seeing like the physician ratings for people transitioning in particular directions, which was really a lot about what this survey was about. So I create a slightly more complex grouping. And it's not at all obvious yet, but let's see, it was number 5, right? There we go. Most of the grouping, because the data set that I'm using is so small, most of the groupings, sorry, that's not readable. There we go. Because the data set was so small, most of the groupings actually ended up being just one entry in there. This is the only element of the grouping that is multiple entries. And just as a quick explanation, what it's describing is that there are 2 people in the survey who were assigned female at birth and identify as non-binary, and they both actually responded with a rating for their physician. One gave their physician 3 stars, the other gave them 4 stars. Well, once I have that information, I can go back to some of the basic operations again. And just extract out, well, what ratings did these people give their general practitioners? Can't really do very much easily with something that's wrapped up in a just. So there's another function that I'm going to use that I actually did not know about until the linter started telling me, hey, instead of doing this pattern, how about you use this function? Which I didn't import. There we go. That function just filters out every nothing value, and it strips off the justs from each value. At which point, I can just take the average. Okay, 3.5. That's not all that great when you're working with a general practitioner. In any case, that's pretty much the end of what I want to talk about. The whole idea of this, though, is to give you an idea of what I'm working with in Haskell. I managed to actually type most of that without creating any errors while on screen. But if you want to know more, first of all, join the Feminist Hack ATX Meetup group, because when I start teaching classes again, I'm going to announce them there. And when I start teaching again, I'm probably going to do almost all of it online. I think I can get authorization to use the conference room in my new office. But whether I do or not, I have to do online classes anyway, because at least one of my students is not even in the state of Texas. And I think that that's going to help a lot of other people. I was having, people would skip because they just couldn't make it through Austin traffic to downtown. I'll make the announcements there. If you want to start experimenting with Haskell on your own, if you want to start reading a lesson plan, the lesson plan we've been following is from the University of Michigan, CIS 194. In particular, the spring 2013 semester. There are lecture notes, actual full-on paragraphs. It's not just little bullet points like what my lecture was, explaining or doing actual full-on explanations as though you're reading a textbook, and then homeworks that you can try to do on your own if you like. I've been teaching a lot from that, and if you want to start going really far into Haskell, you can go to a website called Stackage, which has instructions on first installing Stack, which is the absolute newest tool that we have in the Haskell ecosystem and is fantastic for controlling versions of your compiler, controlling versions of all of your libraries, setting up projects, and it's really actually quite incredible. But the Stackage website includes instructions first for installing Stack on almost every operating system, and then for how to just set up a project and start working within a more project-oriented standpoint. Oh, why did it start over at the beginning? And that's everything for me.
That was pretty awesome, thank you. I really enjoyed that.
No time for questions at the moment?
No, go ahead.
Okay, do any of you have questions at the moment?
What do you use Haskell for?
We have, let's see, at work we have an API server that all of the hardware that we're shipping into the field hits every single second. And we also have a great many additional utility applications that stream data from one service to another within our infrastructure. As time passes and as we have engineering time, we're going to replace some of our past disasters with like whole cloth recoding, and it's going to be in Haskell because I'm probably going to be the one who has to do it.
Okay. Haskell is a backend language. You can use it for backend stuff.
Yeah, you can use it for backend. There's a lot of infrastructures for doing like front-end web development, but it's very old-style web development where everything's done on the server, there's templates, and quite frankly, it's actually quite terrible. Like even the best of them is terrible because the idea of templates that are compiled directly into the code, it's like, well, who thought this was a good idea? But they did.
You can use it as the API server and then have a front-end framework like Angular or
That
Ember or whatever.
It was over summer that I found out that that's how all of the web developers are doing things these days. I've also done work with putting Haskell into an actual full-on GUI environment. It's got bindings into like GTK and Qt. I don't think it has modern bindings into Qt because that whole set of tools changed radically. So it's a very general purpose language.
Okay, awesome.
Are there a lot of good frameworks to access databases, to, I don't know, stand up REST services or something like that?
Oh, so REST services, they're amazingly easy. The one that I'm using the most apparently takes inspiration directly from Ruby on Rails for the REST service portion, but it doesn't dictate anything about anything that's underneath it. So like all of the routes are set up the same way and the methods are set up. For database access, we have, like we've had SQL access to SQLite, Postgres, and MySQL for a long time, but I noticed in the last year a few new libraries that actually made that pleasant to do instead of the nightmare of massive boilerplate that it has been in the past. Okay. I will cede the floor to somebody else.
So the last talk is me, and I'll try and go fast so that we can still have some time to chat and hang out. I'll be giving a talk on Ruby versus Python. I'm also a code school grad. I went to the very first cohort of Maker Square here in Austin in summer of 2013. Then I did Ruby professionally for 2 years at an education startup as their only developer. So I ran the server, had to learn MongoDB, and do Ruby and Rails with JavaScript. Now I work for a subsidiary of Home Depot. It's called Black Locust. They do data science. So I started learning Python a year ago when I started the Python class at Rackspace that we teach, so that I could learn Python to get hired at this company, because I'd met some of the engineers at a meetup and I thought they were so smart and brilliant, I wanted to work with them. And that was the distributed systems meetup. It's kind of like hearing you talk about Haskell. I didn't know a word they were saying, but I knew it might apply further down the road. So I kept going, and now I work there. So there you go. So I've been doing Python in production for 4 months, and then learning it for about a year. So this is just a beginner's view of what Ruby and Python, the differences, which isn't really a lot. There's not a lot of differences.
you just get big fans in both groups and they fight. So. Jules versus snakes. What's the diff? Ruby and Python. So Ruby and Python I've split up on both sides so you can kind of see, but Ruby is considered a little more magical. It has a lot of things out of the box, which means you don't know what's going on under the hood. You know, it's kind of like an automatic car that you just get in and you drive, and it's like awesome until something breaks, and then it really sucks. Where Python is, you know, more like a car you build yourself, and so you have to import everything and declare everything, and it's called explicit. You know, they don't want anything hidden. So like when you do the and or, you know, in a conditional, you actually write out and you write out or, and you write out is not. And that was weird for first. I was like, what? Why do we have to write the English words? So, you know, it's definitely a little heavier on the writing. The syntax is a little different. So some of the pros of Ruby is, like I said, you know, you can quickly get stuff up and running. A lot of people use it with Rails. Python's used with Django. There's more things you have to set up in the beginning, so some people, you know, it's a pain. And then some of the other changes, let's see. The communities are, I think, the biggest difference between the two languages. Both the languages are dynamic. They're not static, so like Haskell is static. You have to declare your types, like this is a string, this is an int. You know, in Ruby and Python, you know, it guesses for you. I think you want this to be a string, and I think this is an int or a float. I don't know. So, you know, which can cause problems, but if you're doing fast, you know, web applications, you don't always want to be doing, you know, static languages. So the biggest thing is the community. Rails has, you know, their fanboys, the Rubyists, and Python has the Pythonistas. And Python tends to be more academically focused. It's used a lot in data science, it's used in analytics, so you're gonna see it in academia. And so it has a lot of libraries that can do fancy stuff and math and algorithms, you know, and graphs and plots and things. Whereas Ruby is, you know, it was written by David Hannemeyer Hansen did Rails. He goes by DHH. But Python, you know, their founder, Guido, he calls himself the benevolent dictator. So both of them have kind of like their superstars, you know, who wrote, you know, the languages and the frameworks. And people kind of drink the Kool-Aid and they're like, they're awesome, or they hate the other group. I'm kind of agnostic using both of them. I'm like, you know, there's nothing I've seen that is so amazing in one language or so amazing in another language. They still have basically the same functionality. It's just what community are you going to be in? If you're going to be in data science, then you probably want to go in Python because there's going to be a lot more support, more answers on Stack Overflow, more groups that you can join. And if you're going to be doing web development, or even stuff is written in Ruby for internal software. I know HomeAway has some Ruby that they use for internal stuff. So there are places that just use Ruby. So it just, you know, comes down to a lot of personal preference. So here you can see some of the companies, you know, Apple and Twitter and GitHub and Airbnb, they use Ruby. Google, you know, Pinterest, Instagram, Mozilla, they're on the Python side. So, you know, if you like them, then you know what they're using. So one of the things that is said a lot about Ruby is it's a magical language. And it does things that traditional programmers would, you know, have a heart attack over. That you can write your class and then override your class and add another function to it. And some people would say, you know, that breaks certain laws and patterns in programming. But for other developers, they're like, it's awesome, it's so extendable, and I can customize and do all these great things. And it's like, yeah, but what if you break stuff? Like, what if you have the same method in the first class, and then you override in the second class? Which one is it going to use? So sometimes magic isn't so great. But if you're programming fast and you guys got to ship code, you know, Ruby might be beautiful. Python is not magic. This is what a class looks like in Python. Much longer, a lot more details, not as cool. You know, you have to do an init function or your object won't exist. So you have to do the init function and then you can write your other functions below that the class is going to use. So, you know, more stuff that you have to set up, but you know exactly what's going on. Here's some things that are in Python and Ruby, so you can see kind of the difference in the syntax. So both of them have anonymous functions. This is called a code block in Ruby, so you know you can give it the name that you want to call it, and then the stuff in here. With Python, you do have to define it, so and then pass it kind of back to itself. But so they both can do anonymous functions, they just look differently. Mapping, you know, you want to map some stuff and then reject if, you know, the array or list is empty and then you want to join a new line. You know, Ruby is really great at chaining, so you can chain your methods. It looks really beautiful, and then Python is not. So again, it's like you have more stuff to do, but then there's kind of a separation of what's going on. You know, you're doing the iterating here, and then here you're joining and stuff. And then here's how you can do some maps and stuff over arrays and lists. And in this way, though, I think Python is a lot more prettier in how it does the loop over, you know, the ranges and stuff. And Ruby's a little heavier. So again, it's like the syntax is kind of similar. It's a little different. I still kind of write in Ruby and then translate to Python because I learned Ruby first. I'm like, how do I do it in Python? And everything's different. You know, the names are different. Python is called a list, and Ruby is called array. In Ruby, it's called a hash. In Python, it's called a dict. Make sure you pronounce the T on the end. Very important. And then another thing that Ruby has that's really nice is it has a reference to the class always, like just there, the self. Python does not. So like I said before, you have to do that init and then pass in self to it so that you can have like self, you know, the reference to your object. So with Ruby, you can just call it wherever and it knows the object exists somewhere. So those are some of the basic differences. And that's it. So this is my funny joke. I agree, they're basically the same. They just look differently. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. We will kind of end right now so that if people need to leave, they can leave. But I'll be around if you have any questions on my journey of Ruby and Python. If you parked in the garage downstairs and you want to get a validation, go to the front desk. Otherwise, I think we have a little bit of food left and more wine, so please drink the wine. Thank you.